Merci, Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie. Rosemary. Excuse-moi. It is an impressive crowd. I hear you're 1,300 listening to me right now. It's a pleasure to be back in Montreal, if only for a night, and it's a real thrill for me. Toronto? Oh. Am I in Toronto? How did that happen? It's a pleasure to be back in Toronto. Be still, my beating heart. And a real thrill to be in the company of such distinguished guests, including two women I have long admired, Mesdames Beverly McLaughlin and Mary Walsh. In fact, I once had the pleasure of interviewing Mary Walsh about her sex life. Que de souvenirs. I was working on a 6-part series on women and sexuality, and Mary Walsh, always the brave one, was willing to spill the beans, so to speak. So I am not the only courageous woman in this room tonight by any stretch of the imagination. I'm, of course, extremely honored to be this year's Hyman Solomon Award winner, a man I never knew. In fact, I had to look him up. Two solitudes oblige, you know. Luckily, Graham Fraser, who happens to be the first recipient of the Hyman Solomon Award, filled me in. I'm afraid he's not here tonight. It seems that Hy, as he was known, was quite the independent thinker, which in my book is the absolute best thing you could say about anyone, and certainly a label I would love to claim. He was also able to throw his weight around. He apparently wrote something that eventually compelled Prime Minister Brian Mulroney to apologize about unflattering comments he had made about the first openly gay member of Parliament, remember him, Sven Robinson. Now, I'm sorry to say I have not yet gotten any Prime Minister or Premier or politician to apologize about anything, though believe me, I'm trying. There are a lot of things that I am passionate about, women, of course, not just women, the way we treat minorities in general and people, minorities in particular, and people in general. The heartbreaking state of the environment and the also sometimes heartbreaking state of our democracy are all very big concerns of mine. In fact, I was struck by something a former editor of the Wall Street Journal and now columnist with the New York Times, Bret Stephens, wrote recently, and I just quoted him in this week's my last column. How do you measure a country's greatness? It's the question that Stephens is trying to answer in this essay. The first measure of greatness, according to him, is the way we treat foreigners or people who aren't exactly like us. How we accommodate la différence is, for me, too, paramount. The second measure of greatness, by the way, according to Bret Stephens, happens to be independent thinking, which brings me back to Hyman Solomon. I can't, of course, pretend having the same weighty pen as Mr. Solomon or his influence, but you know, it takes receiving a prize like this to think that maybe, just maybe, you are making a difference. So again, I'm truly honored by this award. And speaking of making a difference, I feel that I might not be standing here tonight if it weren't for the extraordinary battalion of women known as the Me Too movement that has given a whole new luster to the word feminist and to the whole idea of standing up and being counted. I can't tell you how wonderful this feels, standing here as if riding a huge wave of women, all with their little fists in the air. Almost as wonderful as being called passionate, progressive, and fearless, which is how I believe my candidacy was presented to the Public Policy Forum. I want that on my tombstone. What is it? Passionate, progressive, and fearless. Wow, it doesn't get better than that. So again, thank you, Rosemary, for a great introduction, to the selection committee, to Graham Fraser, and of course to Ed Greenspan and the Public Policy Forum. And À vous tous, messieurs, mesdames, d'être ici ce soir. Merci d'être là.